Pienso en ti aquí en la oscuridad, como cuando marcas sin querer. Cuelgo antes que puedas contestar. Tal vez, nunca más nos vamos a encontrar. Tal vez, el amor no vuelva por acá. Dicen que hace frío por allá, que ya tienes quien te abrazará. Si aún te queda vivo el sentimiento, yo espero aquí. Tal vez, nunca más nos vamos a encontrar. Tal vez, el amor no vuelva por acá. O tal vez tú piensas en volver y nos volveremos a querer. Tal vez.
Tal vez un día deje de pensarte, todos los domingos por la tarde extrañarte. Se ha vuelto parte de mi vida, pero ya no sufro porque ya es rutina. Al final nadie quiso cortar la flor del amor y ponerla a disecar, pero da igual. La distancia es una pequeña muerte y con suerte te vuelve más fuerte. Tal vez, nunca más nos vamos a encontrar. Tal vez, el amor no vuelva por acá. O tal vez tú piensas en volver. Tal vez un día deje de extrañarte y nos volveremos a querer. Tal vez un día deje de pensarte y serás por siempre mi querer. Sentirte, olerte, amarte.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Social Gastronomy Movement's Food Solidarity Gathering. I hope you enjoyed that beautiful song as much as I did. It was a really great way to kick off. So this week-long event series online that we have is our way in this challenging year of bringing our community together to connect, collaborate, and have a dialogue and act around various sectors and topics surrounding the theme of food solidarity, which is near and dear to our hearts. We are so honored to have so many people here, not only leading sessions, but also working every day on the ground to ensure food security in their local communities. Before I introduce our wonderful host for today, I would like to just go over 2 points. The first one is towards the end of the session, there will be a poll that pops up because we really value your feedback. So if you see a poll pop up, just fill it out and it'll close on its own once people submit responses. And then the second point is that this will be recorded and we will be publishing on our YouTube afterwards. So anyone who missed out can go and check on all of this beautiful learning that we get out of this session. So without any further ado, I'm going to just give a brief introduction to our beautiful host, Bibi Gonzalez, who is a political economist and the founder of Eat Better ʻkəʊɪɡʻzɪst in Guatemala. Eat Better ʻkəʊɪɡʻzɪst and Bibi were one of the 10 recipients of the Food Solidarity Fund, which was an initiative that we launched at SGM in July to support and celebrate the work of those working on the front lines of this crisis, providing meals to those in need. So today we're going to be talking with Bibi about the topic stark food realities, to exist or not to coexist, or to coexist or not to coexist, very important. So without any further ado, Bibi, I'll let you take it over. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you so much, Maya, and thank you everyone for joining as well. To a special thanks to the panelists that are joining us today, mostly from Central America, so Guatemala, Honduras, and also from the US. So to the participants today, when we decided about the session that was going to be talked today, I really wanted to bring in what unites us, but also what are the points that diverge. So in some way, I was inspired a bit by William Shakespeare, To Be or Not to Be, and the different perspectives of how we're coexisting. So with that, we tend to say that we need to coexist in harmony, right, from different perspectives. And then, you know, in light with COVID, we have been even more aware of our joint interrelations of how we're coexisting. Our whole social cohesion and dynamic has changed, or even brought more attention to it. But then there's also another point that is regarding food and how we coexist within food issues. Really based on the Guatemalan perspective. In Guate, in short, as I call Guatemala, there is a coexistence of what is called the triple burden of malnutrition. And not only the double burden, but the triple one. So it's a country where more than half of children under 5 are chronically malnourished or stunt, basically of low height. Then there's another one, which is the acute malnutrition with wasting. But then on the other hand, we also have overweight and obesity. And you can see then there's a coexistence of overweight mothers with undernourished kids. And then the third area is the non-communicable diseases of what we're eating. So do we want to coexist, or don't we want to coexist? So in this sense, how can we bridge a better coexistence, if you want to look at it like that, regarding food? So I will be sharing my screen. All right. So this is what we call stark food realities: to coexist or not to coexist. How can we coexist better when we coexist with the triple burden of malnutrition, poverty, and inequality? So thank you everyone for joining. So we welcome today our guest panelists. It's a very diverse panel, and I'm really excited to be here with these wonderful people. So we have Maritza Mendez. She's the head of the Secretariat of Food Security and Nutrition in Guatemala, CESAN in Spanish. We have, Maritza also was the former nutrition officer of the World Food Program in Guatemala. So I know that we have her expertise and her passion and her dedication regarding this issue now that she's leading it in Guatemala. We have Julia Luskombe. She's also a global shaper like me, and she is the head of strategic planning of Feeding America. She's based in Chicago. We have May Hung. She's the founding creator of the Global Shapers in Tegucigalpa, and she's the head of corporate affairs of Walmart Central America. We have Andres Cano. He's the director of Social Lab Guatemala, which Social Lab has numerous entities throughout the Americas. And we have Daniel Pereira. He's the public engagement officer at Oxfam Guatemala and heads this very cool initiative called Paraíso Desigual, or Unequal Paradise. So if anyone is still not here, you can please send them the register link for them to join this conversation. So what will be the structure is that we're going to talk about, you don't really see so many sessions that start with stark food realities. So really meditate when you give out your answers on how these stark food realities impact the area that you're working with. And so do we need to coexist in harmony with a triple burden of malnutrition? So here you have it underlined what they are. And really keep in mind of how we can improve. So how can we be better within our food systems? And really touching about what food system means. I mean, we know first that Latin America is the most unequal country in Latin America. And then Guatemala also comes up as the most unequal. So really, beyond just stating what you do, it's how can we work together in an aligned way to change systems. Systems change has been, brought upon throughout various years, but this year especially, we've been hearing this a lot, and how we, for example, we sought change and we wanted change, and then change happened with this pandemic. But have we really improved? Have we really changed for the better? So maybe take this opportunity, and with the audience as well, how can we, from this session, coexist better as people and actors that touch upon food entities, not only nationally, regionally, but internationally. And so we also been hearing about merge, reset, to transition, and now solidarity with this session with the SGM gathering. So really, how can we be different from this session to others when we touch about this coexistence or not? I will be stop. There you go. All right, so in first, I would love to start with Maritza. Hold on, oh, there you go. So I've known Maritza for a while, and I would really love for you to tell us about your experience of how you have come across challenges on food security and nutrition while your time at the World Food Program, and what are the challenges that CESAN and World Food Programs face, both in common, and now that you're in CESAN, what are the challenges that you've encountered there that are different in WFP for securing people with food and nutrition?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be here with this program and with all these wonderful people. I think that the time that I worked for WFP was such a great learning experience for me. It kind of gave me a wider view of the nutrition issues that I had been working in the past. And I think it prepared me for the role that I have now at CESAN. And I think, of course, that the nature of the issues and the problems that both WFP and CESAN aim to solve are very similar. But I would say that probably the coverage or the extent are very different. Like, for example, when I was in WFP, I thought about project type things, and now I have to think about country-wide things, issues. So I have to think about how food security and nutrition works for everybody in every department, in every municipality, in every community, which is a great challenge, because we know that Guatemala is a very unequal country, like you said, and there are many, many places that are very poor. We actually seem to live in two countries in one. When you live in the city, it seems to be a whole different country than when you go into the rural world, or you work with the rural families. The greatest challenge I think I am facing is that since we are coordinators, what we need to do is really make things happen by articulating activities with the different ministries. Like the Ministry of Health, they have their own responsibilities. The Ministry of Agriculture has a great responsibility. The Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Education. So I think that's one of the greatest issues, that we're not able to implement Well, when I was with WFP, I was able to implement specific things with the government as well. But now I need to coordinate, to articulate, to manage, to make things, I say my team always at CESAN, we need to make things happen because others have to implement them, but we have to make them do it and do it in harmony and in a holistic way on the same territory to be able to have success.
Okay, thank you, Maritza. And with that, I would like to ask Andres from Social Lab. Are you here?
I'm
yeah.
here. Hi, Bibi.
Hi, Andres. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. How are you guys doing?
We're very
It's a little bit
good.
awkward to be here speaking in English to some local people, but we'll try to do our best. Yeah.
Thank you, Andres. Yeah, we have an international audience. So at least for them to understand what it's like living in this part of the world when you talk about something related to social issues. So we heard Maritza that right now she's kind of like coordinating a lot of entities. How does Social Lab work with the production and consumption sectors within food? And how can, for example, the producers or even the consumers have some sort of saying when they want to change something regarding their food sovereignty or their food security?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bibi, for your question. I know I don't want to sound pessimistic, I guess, but I don't think there's a lot that we can actually do. Historically, when it comes to food production in our country and food sovereignty, I would say that we, for the last, I don't know, 5-6 decades, we have been, we've been taking steps backwards, I would say. Particularly because I would say that our economy is based on agriculture, but it's mono-agriculture, which is something that is very difficult to manage since it's not particularly defined for consumption inside the country, but it's driven by private interest outside the country, right? So I would say that there's not a lot that we can actually do. I think that right now, facing climate change, we're looking at our different ecological landscapes being transformed from very humid places to dry places. Something that is very important from Guatemala is that I would say that less than 40% of the land in Guatemala is meant to cultivate food the way that conventional agriculture defines it, right? So, and that has to do with the type of soil that we have. I would say that not all of the soil that we have is suitable for food production, particularly, conventional agriculture. And in that way, we haven't been able to understand or to learn a lot from our ancestors and, just the people that have been living in this territory for a long time. Something particularly that I think that is menacing our existence and our capacity of producing food is water right now. As I was saying before, climate change is drying the areas that used to be humid in the country. And particularly, we haven't been able to understand the water cycle. I mean, most of the people haven't been able to understand the water cycles, but the people that have been actually capable of understanding them have been changing those cycles through, through extractive economical investments in the country. Basically, they've been transforming the water cycle. and that is making it harder for people to be able to produce food. I guess water is infiltrated on the upper basins of our mountains and is being captured by different streams and water that's underneath the soil, right? That is very important for us to be able to guarantee life. But historically, it's been captured by private interest in the country, particularly, you know, the banana industry, the sugarcane industry, and you know, more recently the palm oil industry, and most of the soils that are cultivatable in our country have been taken by those industries, and you know, people that have been producing food for our countries here, I mean for local people here, have been having a lot of trouble to find conditions to be able to do it, and have falling into, you know, conventional practices as well, trying to overcome, you know, the market, which obviously there's a huge inequality in the way that they approach the market, obviously because of how conventional agriculture works, and the way that it produces massively, I guess. And something that is very important, I guess, is when it comes to what sorry, I think it was Maritza, wasn't it? Maritza was saying is, I think that she was talking about, you know, articulating perspectives from the different governmental offices that there are. I think that we haven't really had a government that sees in a very realistic way how nature and economy have to work together in a way. You know, just food production in the last 5 or 6 decades have been transforming the way that we see landscape in our country. They have been transforming the water cycles as well. And seems like the people, but also the government, have been looking at agriculture as something separate from ecology, you know, being part of the same. And so we need a more realistic perspective, a government that understands that you know, healthy soils and healthy forests and healthy upper basins in our mountains means better food, and better food means better health as well. So I think that from the productor's perspective, or from, you know, the people that we work with, right now they have very harsh conditions. They are looking at their soils being, you know, having a lot of erosion. They're looking at, you know, the water being contaminated highly. Their soils are not producing anymore unless they use a lot of fossil fuels. You know, fossil fuels and just pesticides and yeah, so they're not looking at a very good time, and they are also lacking a lot of access, you know, to market, to understanding how to introduce their products to the market as well. And also they've been having a very hard time trying to incorporate new generations to this idea of producing the soil and the food as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Andres, and we have it very, very clear, and I'm really glad you touched upon the ancestors, the climate and the environment perspectives, and also how important soil is, where actually food grows from and where they get the nutrients. Since you were talking about also the corporate sector, I'm glad to have May here to talk about a bit of how corporate sector is transitioning or improving its practices to be more aware and conscious of the people that live there, of the natural resources that they have around, and if they're doing actually something to protect that. And for example, you in Walmart, do you have some sort of, let's say, product eligibility that can be in your stores to be sold to consumers? And do you differentiate those that are following good practices and that are healthy for people and the planet?
Okay. Thank you, Bibi, and hello to everyone. I'm really glad and happy to be sharing this, to exist or not exist, and I love it, like to be or not to be. But definitely, I think we both need an interaction about it. From the corporate point of view, we really are considering, and worry about how with the COVID activities, the change of food has changed in the way people did business before. Because right now, with all the restrictions that you have for mobility, or due to cierres of confinement that they're doing in different cities and regions around the world, it makes people to be auto-sustainable of what you have to do within your same area, because you don't have always access to different food. So first is the access to food that we have to be taken care of. That's why we say, like, okay, you can close down and shut down the city, but you cannot shut down industry and the people who move the city, because in order for you to have food on your plate, you really need somebody else to move it from one place to the other, because not all the regions and not all the countries can produce the same products. So that's one point I can mention. And the other thing is, like, okay, we try to be auto-sustainable. In Walmart, we have a wonderful project in the region who was established more than 20 years ago, where we go and look for the agro-industrial people, for farmers to produce what we need. So this time it's not like just waiting and sitting down to somebody come on and knock the door like, hey, I have some tomatoes and potatoes, you want them? So what we do is, like, we really need this. And we do a calendar for the year, so we know where are we gonna get, for example, tomatoes from the different regions, and we go and we divide the countries in different segments, so we can go and look for suppliers in order to provide what we need. In that way, it's also from the corporate point of view, it's really important engagement that the different USAID or German aid institution and all these all ONGs do in order for farmers to be empowered, to know how to produce, and also to have their accountability in order for them to be our suppliers. Because at the end, supermarkets are not the ones, we do support these programs, but we need the technical advice for farmers to produce without with BPA, free agents, with fewer fertilizations, with a lot of other things. So we need this technical support in the agribusiness, and I know there's many wonderful projects that many institutions are doing, World Vision, and I know that CHF and a lot of Institución Mundial, who are supporting farmers in order for them to produce safer and to have a formal market. On the other hand, also from the corporate point of view, there's a nice practice that we have on what Bibi called food waste. It's really a shame that we have so many people who doesn't have access to food, who has malnutrition and everything, and they don't have a place where to and they don't have food. And then on the other hand, you have a lot of industries and a lot of things in the market that's natural, that you have a lot of food waste. So we are really, and we have worked a lot with different institutions, with with global food banks, and we established and we're supporting food banks in the whole Central American regions, because that way we can make sure, like, okay, maybe an industry or something has a more amount of the liquid they have to put in their package. So instead of throwing it away because it's a commercial situation, they can give it to the food banks. Or for example, if you have like all the Christmas pancakes or decorations or articles that have Christmas in their label and they're up to people eating it, you can use it wisely and donate it to this to the food banks, so they can distribute it to the different institutions they can help. And lastly, because I don't want to steal everybody's time, also we have, yes, we do have eligibility on and differentiation of foods. We tried and we checked how the suppliers, we do this, random visits to our suppliers to see how they're doing, how they're treating the foods, and how to get the better BPA free, and also with the best practice in agriculture procedures of less fertilizants and a lot of things that can help us get the best products we have. There's an important factor in the corporate world in our countries. And sometimes in order to get this access to food, because we have like the production, and then you sell it to the supermarket, and then you have the options of what the clients really want to do. And even though you can merchandise and do a lot of marketing of eat healthy, eat fruits and veggies, people usually don't prefer that because sometimes we're not really responsible with ourselves, and we buy things that have more preservatives and sugar and a lot of other things that they're not bad, but I think that in the right amount, at the end, it's our own responsibility how we eat. But we sponsor that people can look like this is organic free or organic, I'm sorry, or this is better for your health and everything, or get recipes like Wade is doing. But at the end, the whole chain has to work from the beginning. So this is why and closing down with what Bibi was telling us, like to exist or not exist, we do coexist among everyone, because we depend on the farmer, we depend on who travels and manages and transport the food to the distribution centers, and from the distribution centers to the supermarket, and then from the supermarket to people to choose or to buy whatever they need, and then they serve it, and they can buy vegetables and fruit. But then at your home, you also have to consider how you're going to cook them, because if you get the veggies and then you fry them, or you manipulate them in non-correct recipes, then at the end, it doesn't matter. You're eating your veggies, but not in a responsible way. So at the end, we all coexist in this, Bibi.
Okay. What you've touched upon so much, and that I was actually struggling to give the mic to Julia, because she works also regarding food banks, or give it to Daniel regarding just all that process that you mentioned earlier. So I'm going to take what you said just now last about the entire people that are within the food chain, and I'll ask Daniel this question. Basically, the whole food systems are people that run entities or that work within entities. So the human factor is just there. But within everyone that is there, there's a lot of the starting part with the agricultures, and then you have like the corporate heads. With that, there exists a lot of disparities. So how do you think, with the work that you're also doing from Oxfam and Paraíso Desigual, how can we bridge those inequalities and have an equal food system or equitable system for everyone? Is that possible? And if it's not, or if it is, how can we make that happen?
La pregunta del millón. Thank you, Bibi. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to meet some of you that I haven't met before virtually. It's a very tough question. I mean, we're tackling a huge topic in this talk today, and I tend to agree with Andres that it's very hard to be optimistic given the history of our country and what we know of the current situation. You know, I don't know if our listeners are aware of the fact, or if this has been touched upon. I imagine it has, the fact that Guatemala has the highest rates of infant chronic malnutrition in the hemisphere, despite the fact that we have the largest economy in the sub-region, in the Central American region. So we're infamous, unfortunately, we're infamous for heading a lot of the human development indices throughout history. Whatever it is that you look at, poverty, extreme poverty, inequality, Gini coefficient, inequality with regard to this distribution of land, and not only with regard to wealth, income, and political participation. That's kind of the background for launching the initiative that you mentioned earlier that I helped to coordinate, which is an alliance, a space for articulation among different youth collectives, NGOs, think tanks, and different expressions of civil society, which is called Paraíso Desigual. And it is, you know, let's think about the fact that we're a country that is so fraught with these disparities that you mentioned. And think about what that entails for the well-being of everybody, and not just, I mean, the difference between thinking about social issues and political questions through the lens of poverty versus looking at these same issues through the lens of inequality is significant. The reason is because it enables us to consider non-economic factors, non-economic consequences, effects of these huge disparities. So it's not just the fact that some people have a lot of wealth and income, and a lot of people have very little income and wealth. It's the fact that that has a direct effect on a series of issues regarding the health of our democracy, the fact that not everybody's vote is equal, that some people's vote or political preferences are more influential and more important and more determinant of our social reality than others. The fact that not everybody is affected equally by natural phenomena, and so the fact that we have socio-natural catastrophes every year or every couple of years, and we look at the fact that not everybody's affected in the same way. When we have a hurricane, I mean, hopefully we won't have very bad flooding this year, but it might happen. We're in the midst of the season, and fortunately this year we've had more rainfall, but all these factors that make us such a vulnerable country environmentally, they don't affect everybody the same way. They don't affect people who live in the capital city, in the better off areas of the capital city, than communities that live in the Polo Chic River Valley, or in the Corredor Seco, you know, in the east of the country. The fact that economic stagnation tends to bog down the economic status of everybody in the country. The fact that we don't close those gaps makes it really hard to project an economic growth that is, you know, more optimistic than 3-4% GDP growth per year, for example, just to say a few of the effects. And violence, you know, direct social effect of this kind of inequality is social violence in all of its expressions. Gender violence, particularly, obviously organized crime and delinquency and everything, but just a social fabric that is not healthy, that is not thriving, that is not flourishing, where we don't have much cohesion as a society, we don't have a lot of social trust. You know, all of these things are the effect of that extreme concentration of wealth, income, and political power that disenfranchises and leaves so many people out of not just the political process, but also in being able to have a say in their destiny and what they want to do with their lives, how they see themselves flourishing. A little girl being born right now in the municipality of Tucuru, for example, in the Porochic River Valley, a Kekchi girl being born right now, will obviously not have the same prospects for flourishing as a person than a little boy being born right now in a private hospital in Zone 10 or in Zone 15 of Guatemala City. That is a fact, and nobody's going to deny that. So there's no, even if we don't go into a discussion of equality of outcomes, if we just start out with a common premise that I think we share across the ideological spectrum, that we want to see more equality of opportunities, we still have such a long way to go in Guatemala. And so in terms of food, I mean, I think food is at the core of culture. I'm an anthropologist by training, but and with a history background. So I know that food, and I also love to eat. And so, and I'm a foodie, and my brother's a chef. And we think about these things. What does food mean for healthy, thriving families, neighborhoods, communities, municipalities, departments, regions, and the country? And it's everywhere. There's no way to even think about any aspect of social life that doesn't entail some aspect of food, and in its entire chain, from farm to table, if we want to use the American expression. So I would say, just not to go on and on, just to wrap up with an idea that I think a lot of us share. I mean, it's controversial. It's been a politically contentious issue throughout our history. It's part of the reason why we had internal armed conflict, the Civil War, and it has to do with the distribution of land. It has to do with the access to arable and fertile, productive land. If we want to support, if we want to close the gaps of inequality, people need to be able to feed themselves and feed each other and feed their communities, and do it in a way that's sustainable. And so one way to do that is supporting, much more robustly supporting family agriculture, family farms. And that just seems like such a no-brainer, but it is contentious, not just here. I think in many parts of the world. In the United States, it's also a very contentious issue. Agribusiness is the common sense of our political economic system. But in a country where most people still live in the countryside and still produce food, and this represents their main form of life, and not just their economic activity, but the way that their entire culture and political system is structured, family farms are critical. And so access to good land, to land that is productive, is very important. Of course, there's a lot more that we can say, but I'm going to end it there. I would like to just mention another factor that Andres also mentioned, and it's water, right? So we're becoming more and more, in the middle of this crisis of the pandemic, I think a crisis is, and it's a cliche, but it's true, a crisis is an opportunity. And this has been a huge opportunity, the COVID crisis, to sensitize such broad swaths of the, especially urban population, to the plight of most of the population, because now everybody suddenly feels vulnerable, and everybody has felt vulnerable because we don't have a good health system, but also because suddenly the issue of access to potable water becomes much more tangible, much more understandable. I think there is still an opportunity, because this crisis hasn't ended and it will carry on into 2021, that was a huge opportunity for sensitizing, for raising awareness, and for making more parts of the population, especially parts of the population that have relative political capital, social capital, cultural capital, become more aware of the fact that inequality represents a risk, an existential threat to everybody, not just to the poor or the extreme poor or those who don't have access to food. You can use a series of metaphors, but if we're a family, for example, you can't, the entire family is going to be, is not going to thrive, it's not going to flourish, it's not going to be healthy if 2 or 3 of the children are chronically malnourished, don't have access to water, don't have opportunities. maybe that's not the best metaphor because it sounds like the government or the state is the father, and I don't want to reinstate that idea of the paternalistic state, but we are meant to see each other as part of the same chain. And if the weakest links happen to be half of that chain, and it represents a threat to the health and the possibility for thriving for everybody, I think that is something that's a learning, that's an invaluable learning or takeaway from the COVID crisis. And I think more people are aware today than they were 10 months ago about why this should be a political priority and not be framed in the polarizing terms of ideological dispute, and be more understood as something that has to do with humaneness and with sustainability and with the possibility for society as a whole to flourish. We're at the brink of a social crisis because the pandemic hasn't been addressed in the best way possible. So we're probably going to see more poverty next year. We're estimating 1.2 million more people that are going to be in poverty next year unless social programs are maintained. And we're discussing the budget for 2021 right now. I'm going to Congress in an hour with a few colleagues because we need some of these social programs to be kept in the budget for next year. Otherwise, we're going to see 1.2 million more people in poverty, 110,000 more people in extreme poverty, and we're starting to make projections about what this crisis entails for chronic infant malnutrition and acute malnutrition, which shouldn't exist in the 21st century, and here we are. So I do believe in the role of the government and the state in doing something about this as our representatives. You know.
Thank you, Daniel. That was fantastic, and you've explained in such a thorough way. And Maritza, that goes also with another question that I had with you. But before that, Julia, Daniel has been touching of how we're all a family and how we need to be focused on feeding ourselves and then feeding others. How has Feeding America and your job basically, and what you've been doing, what you've been working throughout the U.S., and how do Latinos or Latinos see food now they're in the U.S. because they migrated for some reason, that then the diaspora is there. How is that relationship from let's say our countries that migrated to yours regarding malnutrition? Do they see themselves, do they have their own farms? Do they value it, or they just eat processed food?
Great, thank you, Bibi. Great to be here with everyone and reflecting on the conversation so far. I think there's way more points of commonality in terms of challenges to the food system and opportunities for transformation and the countries we're all representing, rather than differences. So a bit about Feeding America. May touched on food banks. So we're a network of 200 food banks that cover all of the United States. And we work with food supply chain partners to distribute food to agencies and meal programs all across the country. And we're doing that at a scale that I think would be shocking to a lot of folks, knowing the size of the US economy. So we distributed this past year over 5 billion meals. We estimate pre-COVID about 37 million people in the US were food insecure. And we think with COVID's impact, that's likely to go up by over 40% over the next year. And then in parallel to that, 30 to 40% of the food produced in the US is going to waste. So there's a huge demand supply challenge that we're trying to work through in our food system. For the Latinx population specifically, we know that food insecurity rates are higher. So the food insecurity rate in the US is about 11%. For the Latino population, it's over 15%. And that disparity is even higher for Latino children, so 18%. So Bibi, to your question, something that we see is food insecurity rates are higher among non-citizens. So a lot of times folks may not realize that they're eligible for public benefit programs that could help them get food assistance, like food stamps. And so they may be fearful of applying and may just avoid applying. You know, to the question, it's interesting because obviously the Latinx population and immigrants in particular are playing a huge role in growing food, producing food in the whole country. And so the fact that there's food insecurity among that population, despite that role, is really a stark reality. And I think by and large, what we see is the Latinx population consuming and playing a role in the food system that other Americans are playing. So going to the grocery store and kind of, if they're food insecure, making tough trade-offs to think about how they get the food they need. So whether it's using public benefits at a grocery store, going to a food pantry, getting support from friends and family. I think that kind of community support is something we see playing a really large role in the Latinx population. And for us, specifically on malnutrition, obesity is really how that manifests in the US. So Latinx children are more likely to be food insecure in the US, and they're more likely to be obese. And that's because if you're at a higher rate of poverty, you're more likely to have risk factors associated with obesity and food insecurity. So eating more carb heavy or fattening foods that stave off hunger, lower quality food like fast food is more likely to be affordable. And when you do have food available, there's cycles of overeating. And then of course, stress, limited access to healthcare, all those other things that come with poverty. So, you know, it was interesting in talking with you, Bibi, in preparation for this session, that there might be a perception that there's a preference for processed food or sugar-rich foods. And you know, sometimes that's the case, special occasions, but by and large, among the people we serve, we see that folks want that fresh produce, and they're often coming to food pantries in our network looking for fresh produce because it can be so expensive at the grocery store. Farmers markets are also popular among the people we serve. Many farmers markets accept food stamps, and what we hear from the people we serve, including the Latinx population, is that they love going there for that sense of community. So, you know, thinking about this huge demand supply challenge to our system, meeting that in a way that's part of, you know, to Danielle's comments, part of building that food culture, building community. I think that's our challenge with the scale we're operating at, is continuing to do this in a way that meets people's needs, helps them get the nutritious, culturally appropriate foods they're looking for. And not just about taking that oversupply and getting it in folks' hands. The final comment I'll make on systems change and our obesity epidemic in the US is that it's really a vicious cycle, right? So if the affordable foods are low cost, more accessible, then the people who are eating that are having poor health outcomes. And then once they have health conditions like diabetes, then their healthcare costs go up. And so then that in turn reduces their financial resources available for food, and in turn increases their food insecurity. So when we think about systems change, we have to think about all these interrelated issues, all the players in that system, and the different points to intervene.
Awesome, thank you so much, Julia. And it's also great to know the motivation of how food brings that sense of community. So we have a poll here just 10 minutes before it's going to end. I don't know if you guys see it, or is it just me, Maya?
No, we can see it.
Yeah. Okay, so you have time to answer this throughout the minutes that we still have here. Awesome. All right, and with Julia, what you just said about food and community and the sense of fresh produce. What we've been doing here in Guatemala, we've been doing these improved fruit baskets. Oh no, sorry, not fruit baskets. Improved food baskets that include in the majority fruits and vegetables when we are responding in an emergency, a food emergency with COVID. However, I started this because I saw that even public and private entities were not delivering foods that were appropriate for a health pandemic. So with that, I would like to touch on Maritza. And then I'm just going to ask very quick questions for everyone, and maybe you can all answer as well. Basically, it's all cross-sector. We see how intertwined we are and how we're also a family within this food system. And within food systems, we had this very great session with Abdullahi from the World Economic Forum, where he touched upon the systems change. So how can we do these systems change? And he talked about three elements, or three components. One are the people, the elements that are within us, the interconnection that we have amongst us, and with the function that we play. What's the role? So basically, he just put an example. For example, you're in a factory and you're in an iPhone factory, and you see 3 iPhones that are misshapen or they're malfunctioning. Do you do something? What do? Do you tackle those 3 iPhones and you fix them before they go off for the final client? Or do you go to the roots of where that problem is originating? Because 3 of them or just 1, there's something wrong. So keeping that in mind, Maritza, I would really like to ask you, how can we merge those cross-sector collaborations within the very simple ways? For example, why, or maybe understand why the mentality of, for example, responding to an emergency, specifically on food, we're giving out boxes or baskets of foods that aren't necessarily appropriate for one's healthy state. For example, we've been giving out, as I mentioned, fruits and vegetables, no sugar, no oil, not even harina to make tortillas, because we don't want to stigmatize the women in that role of making tortillas. How can we make it possible for people to understand and to actually walk the talk? If we say we want regenerative agriculture, we want people to feed themselves, and for them to be healthy, to achieve at least SDG 2, to reduce all forms of malnutrition, what needs to be done for a changed mindset of, even if you're providing food baskets, why don't you provide the ones that are supporting local markets, regenerative agriculture, and healthy foods? Why is it all those non-perishable foods? I know the logistic part, but wouldn't it be great that everyone gives out what is necessary for a not only the now, but the long-standing of the well-being of people?
Bibi, I think I have to agree with you that being able to offer a variety and diverse diet even through social programs is very needed. That's why I prefer when social programs work through cash, for example, because when you give cash with education, with nutrition education, people are able to choose what they want to buy, and you can orient them. And usually what we have seen is that when this happens, people tend to buy more vegetables, more fruits, eggs, usually foods that they don't get to have at home very often. So I think that it doesn't have to be the classic bag or box of dry foods, but it could also be through cash or vouchers. However, that also depends on the market. If the market is working well, then that is great. You can give cash and you can mobilize local economy by doing this. But what you were doing, directly giving, it can also work if the market is not working, and then you wouldn't be able to give the cash. But I would like to touch on the main topic of this program. You said, should we exist or should we not coexist? And I wasn't sure what you meant, but I would like to talk specifically about the planet and the environment, because by listening to all the other speakers, I remember how I felt the first time that I heard about the planetary diet, because I'm a nutritionist, and as nutritionists, we learned how to think about how to make sure that every person or every group of people or community get to have all the nutrients they need. But now it's not that. And it's like you put in a circle all those needs or all those foods that meet the needs, and then in another circle, all the needs of the environment. And it's only after you put this together and that you find the right intersection where the planet will survive with what we are doing and where people will keep nutritious diets and also keep healthy, that we're going to find this coexistent in a harmonious way. So I wanted to share that because I think that people touched it in different ways. But something else that touched me was I felt like some people were like giving up. I think I wouldn't be here where I am if I weren't an optimistic, and I am inevitably an optimistic. And I do think that there are things that we can do day by day, person by person, community by community, and that's why I'm here, because I believe that by working all together, and I mean as a society, we can change the reality that we have in Guatemala. So that's my message. I think we can do it. It is terribly difficult, but we can do it. And I think there are many wonderful people like the ones here that are already giving an example that it is possible to go ahead.
Definitely. And before Daniel runs off to Congress and talk about the funds and the budgetary, how much is it necessary? Or for example, in your work areas, how much money is it necessary to achieve the reduction of malnutrition? How much money are we talking about? This is open to everyone.
I think maybe Maritza might be in a better position to answer that. I don't have the figures fresh in my mind. It's a significant amount considering that our budget is so small. Everything seems like it's insurmountable when you have a state as small as the Guatemalan state. So we have the smallest tax revenue in relation to GDP than any country in the Western Hemisphere, and one of the lowest in the world. So we just generate about 10.2, 10.4% tax revenue in relation to GDP. That's tiny. I mean, the average for developed countries is upwards of 25, 30%. So we can't finance almost anything. That leads us to another contentious issue, which has to do with fiscal reform and tax reform. We're not going to get into that now. I think there's a lot that we can do with what we have. I think there's a lot that we can do with the budget that we do have. And I think that's our immediate task, is to insist that with the funds that are available, they can be better allocated to address the priorities of the social majorities. And that is just a matter of political will. It is just a matter of legislature, or of Congress people, legislators, understanding and accepting that the distribution of budgetary allocations can better reflect an interest in human well-being, in the well-being of the population. So instead of investing right now in certain parts of the economy that might well benefit larger businesses and corporations in the mid to long term, I mean, which are investments that are also important perhaps, but not in the immediate term, not in the short term, especially not in the middle of a crisis and a pandemic. We need to prioritize the kinds of measures that are going to help people survive this crisis, and not have to retroceder. You know, we don't want to lose ground, because it's been so hard to gain the little ground that we've gained in the last 20 years. And we might just lose it like this in a matter of this year because of the pandemic. And that has to do with our poverty index, our extreme poverty index, our inequality index, malnutrition as well. And so what we're insisting is just keep some of these emergency programs for next year, because the crisis isn't over. And some of these have to do with cash transfers. We believe cash transfers are here to stay. We know about conditional cash transfers. We've been doing them around the world for 30 years, and Guatemala pioneered it in this region over a decade ago. But now we're talking about unconditional cash transfers, where everybody around the world is suddenly talking about universal basic income, not as something completely exotic and far-fetched as we were about a year ago. Now we're talking about this as something that's viable, that's necessary, that maybe it's a necessary measure to confront the crisis, but maybe it's a measure that needs to stay because of the characteristics of our economy and our society. And if we can't discuss a universal basic income in a country like Guatemala because we can't finance it, we can't talk about an unconditional basic income directed at the 60% of the population that lives under the poverty line. And how do we finance that? Well, before we get into tax reform and everything, we can just discuss the efficiency, the relative inefficiency of the current institutional framework, the current bureaucracy. And we can eliminate a bunch of little programs that just generate a bunch of unnecessary expenses within the state apparatus, and just focus on the kinds of programs that we know affect and improve people's lives. So, such as an unconditional income. And the last thing I want to say in terms of food is, for example, if we have an emergency program for food assistance for the people and families and the communities that are going through a food crisis in the middle of the pandemic, so we have this big program, why not insist from the beginning? But we didn't, and now, or we did from civil society, but why not give that a priority in Congress to make those public purchases not with the big businesses, the big agribusiness, big commercial lost the terminology, the big food producers, and just buy from family farms. I mean, some of the things that people need just to survive, in terms of corn, in terms of beans, in terms of the very basics, those could very well be purchased from small scale family farms. And that would be a boon for a lot of these communities. But we choose not to prioritize those providers when it has to do with public contracts. We tend to just favor big businesses that can handle the volume, and it's just a matter of creativity and imagination. Working with what we have, we can do that.
I think that creativity is awesome. Tomorrow we're going to have a session specifically on creative minds for food systems. And before we end, I really want to hear like the last comments of every panelist. So Daniel, we've heard from you, Andres, May, Julia, Maritza, if something that you would like to add, and on a positive note of how we, for example, I have the polls here, and there's something that how I feel about me leaving this session, and one was neutral. I would really love for everyone to have at least something like a call to action or something to bring that a bit more hopeful in those sense. So maybe have one last comments from everyone of how then can we coexist better.
I can go. I think to the investment point, right, it's going to take a lot of investment to transform the food system, but we have to do it in a way that's user-centered. So really committing to understanding the needs of people dealing with malnutrition, dealing with hunger, and understanding how those vary by community and population. That's going to help us really prioritize those investments and put them in the right place. So I think we can't lose sight of that human element and really spend the time and having people dealing with malnutrition and hunger shape these solutions and have a seat at the table as we build this food system transformation as well.
Hi, I would say that also we need to observe better nature, I guess. Learn the cycles, nature cycles, to understand what we can consume naturally, produce naturally, understand which species are native from places that we are, and which of them can provide us with food that can actually be good for us, good for the soil, good for the environment as well. Something else that I think that is very important is understanding water cycles, which is something that in the future will be very relevant for us. Try to, not only us as civil society or organizations, try to focus on the upper side of the basins, make sure that they have very, very rich woods that can infiltrate water and provide water. And also try to avoid this idea that, the political way that we are distributed in geographically in Guatemala is not very good for us to be able to understand the water curse, we need a lot of work in terms of articulation between, local governments and institutions from the state government as well. And something else that I think that is very important is trying to bring back knowledge from our ancestors. They all the technology that they have, and that they've been taking care of that knowledge and bringing it together and translating it from one generation to the other. We need to save that knowledge as well, because conventional agriculture has done a lot of damage to the planet. The way that the conventional agriculture produces food liberates a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And agriculture is also, and will be, surely will be, a great tool for us to be able to bring that carbon back into the soil, to capture it back through plants, through regenerative agriculture. So I think that we need to better understand which technologies we can use in the future for us to be able to, nurture ourselves, provide ourselves with, nutritious food, and also food that is very good for our environment. And I think that as consumers, we have a great, challenge for us to be able to inform ourselves and better understand where our food comes from.
That's true. Inform ourselves. Yeah. May?
Yeah. At the end, I think it's all a chain, and I love this. I don't know if you guys have seen Lion King, The Circle of Life, and how we all need everybody in order to do everything, since water, air, transportation, consumers, and a lot of things. And I think that the big opportunity we have right now is auto-sustainability, that we have to be self-productive and self-conscious. And we should see the pandemic as an opportunity to return to basics, like whenever everybody around you in your communities started to produce for themselves. So I think we have an opportunity to think that we don't have to be codependent on others, and that we should try to have a better surrounding in our own communities. I'm saying, I know we cannot do it in your own house. I tried to produce some tomatoes and I failed on that because I saw everybody doing this in the pandemic. So I said, I'll try it myself, and it's really hard and difficult. So our appreciation to farmers and people who know how to produce that. But on the other hand, I think we need to be more auto-sustainable within our own communities and surrounding.
Totally. Yes, May. And yeah, growing is difficult. It takes time, and it's not valued as much as it should be. Definitely. And Maritza, we have a couple of questions here on the chat, and also please, we would like to know your input.
Can I go? Okay, so some final thoughts. I think that we can coexist better by respecting each other and the environment, and that means reducing inequalities. Definitely, that's part of the respect, I mean. And talking about the planet, I think we need to promote food systems, but in a sustainable way. And also that we need to have more social investment, and we need to have strengthened social protection systems also that are really able to reach the poorest, but the poorest of the poorest.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Maritza. And also to understand, definitely to also change the way that we understand the problem and speak about the problem. Basically, and we've touched upon malnutrition as a whole, that doesn't really discriminate, but it's mostly touched upon everyone in a different way, in a different severity. So with this, I would like to end our session here today. Before that, I would like to share the results of our poll. I hope you see it. So thank yous to those that agreed or strongly agreed, and those that aren't necessarily part of the social gastronomy movement. I invite you to join, to be part of this, to bridge those, to bring that social justice or social change through food. And I think that everyone here has that will, even if they're optimistic or pessimistic. You're here for something, right? And let's make that worthwhile with a purpose that joins us, everyone, which is for this session at least, is food, and how can we live better in the times that we have in this planet, and take care of it. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and I'll go ahead and give it to Maya.
Thank you. Bibi, amazing. Also, I love just that you're engaging Guatemala in the social gastronomy movement, because I think it's so important, and these kind of dialogues is exactly, what we're about here. So I think just as, we said, it's together we can change not both Guatemala and the stark realities there, but I also think around the world as well. And yeah, so I just really appreciate you all that came today for sharing your stories, your ideas, your knowledge with us. I found it to be strongly valuable for me. So I couldn't fill out the poll because I'm a host, but I'll give you that feedback. And if, like Bibi said, if you would like to get involved with the social gastronomy movement, our tech assistant Maud here is going to bring up a slide with a few links that you guys could check out. We have this beautiful map that just maps out all of the members of the social gastronomy movement, what they do, what skills they have to offer, what skills they need. So if you become a member, whether you're an advocate for food, whether you work in the government, whether you're an organization, whether you're just somebody looking to make a change, please do check it out. You can see what you can do really, and how you can connect with others from around the world. And then also, yeah, if you're looking to partner or become a potential ally, you can also do that at our website. So just to close out, I'm going to pass it back to Bibi because I think she has something to share. So we'll take this away. I will send some of the links in the chat for anybody who would like to check it out. And just last thing, don't forget to check out some of the other sessions we have going on. As Bibi mentioned, we're going to have a really cool storytelling session, so make sure to check out our site and sign up. And to you, Bibi.
Thank you. So thank you to the participants and to the panelists. You can follow them on their social media platforms. Here they are. So you have WAIC, you have CESAN, you have Feeding Americas, Social Lab, Oxfam, Paraísos Igual, Walmart, and of course, social gastronomy, that without them this wouldn't be possible. And here is Guatemala featured, because in the other part of the map it was hidden. So I'm very happy that Guatemala is finally on the SGM map, and hope that as a region and also as a country we can connect with so many more and make that change possible. And here are the slides. Well, thank you so much for the partners of the SGM gathering. So with that, whenever possible, please come to Central America, to Guatemala, and we'll be happy to have you here. hopefully with some very nutritious foods from local markets and farmers.
That sounds so amazing, Bibi. Expect a visit from me when this pandemic goes away. I will be there. So thank you everyone for joining today. It was a pleasure. And thank you, Bibi, for being an incredible host, and for everyone on our panel. You guys were amazing. So lots of gratitude to you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Gracias.